Meanwhile, Alan Smith has been joined in the milking parlour at Barnet Hill by Mark Crawshaw, who's come to do some routine sampling for mastitis. And his handheld technology makes the test quick and impressive.
If it's a cow with subclinical mastitis and we don't know which quarter to sample, it's not obvious, then we can use a California mastitis test, and this will allow us to identify the infected quarter. What it relies on is putting an equal volume of milk into each of these cups, adding some of this reagent to the cups, swirling it round. If we get a thickening of the mixed solutions, then that indicates that the cell count of that quarter is elevated, and that's the quarter to sample. So we just first of all put some milk into each of these cups. There you go. There you go. Okay. You can see already in this case we're getting thickening in this one here, jelly-like thickening of the milk.
What's that telling you?
That tells us that the cell count of that quarter is elevated, and this jelly-like reaction indicates that there's mastitis there. You could also argue, in fact, that this quarter here also has a slight jelly-like reaction as well, but you'd probably want to sample these two quarters in this case to identify the cause of the mastitis in that cow. Great. You can see the jelly reaction there coming off the...
At Lang Hill Farm near Edinburgh, the Royal Dick School of Veterinary Studies runs one of the most closely monitored herds in Scotland. One aspect of work here is regular milk sampling after the teats have been thoroughly wiped, dried and then treated with a spirit wipe.
Well, the main thing that we're interested in here is to try and get the sample as clean as possible and make sure we don't have any contamination from the outside of the cow's teat that might confuse us as to actually what's going on the inside of the cow's teat. So we need to make sure the cow's teat's as clean as possible. And what I'm going to do is just scrub it, the end of the cow's teat, with this wipe, just to try and get rid of as much muck and everything from the outside of the cow's teat. Okay, so just doing that. And then what I'm going to do is just draw out a bit of milk here, because there's still some contamination inside. So I'm taking out as much of that outside contamination. So we're getting a good flow of milk here. I'm just scrubbing the end there just to make sure we've got it as clean as possible. And now what I'm going to do, I've got the sample, I'm very careful wearing gloves. I'm also making sure nothing drops into it. And I'm just taking my milk sample at the moment, just to make sure we get as minimum contamination as possible. And again, we're putting the milk back on it again. We're going to put it in the fridge before we then send it off to the lab tomorrow for them to be able to grow any bacteria that might be in there.
What we're looking for is the bacteria in the milk that are causing mastitis in the cows. And once we've identified the bacteria that are definitely causing the mastitis in a good number of animals, then we can start to build a prevention program for the farm. What's absolutely vital is that the milk samples are collected correctly to avoid them being contaminated with bugs that aren't causing mastitis, bugs that might come from the environment or cow species, etc. And if the sample isn't collected properly, we can get results which are totally useless, and it will be a waste of time of the farmer, the vet, and the money that's been invested in the sampling program.
Visually, how does a good and a bad sample compare in the lab?
Well, a bad sample has lots of different bacteria in it, and usually lots of them, so it's heavily contaminated. And this might obscure the bacteria that we're interested in, or it might mean that we're not sure whether the bacteria have come from the cow's udder and therefore have been causing mastitis, or whether they've come from the environment. And the sort of sample that we're looking for is a pure growth of one particular species of bacteria. And you can see that by the colonies that grow on the blood agar. They're all exactly the same, and that means you've got a pure growth, and that's the ideal. That's really the objective of the whole exercise, is to get a pure growth.
When you're looking at the sample, how important is it to identify the cause of the problem?
Well, it's crucial for dairy farmers to know what particular bacteria are causing the particular mastitis problem on their farm. There's lots of different sources of bacteria. Some of them come from the cows themselves and are spread in the milking parlour. Other bacteria come from the cow's environment, from the bedding and the dung, etc. And clearly, if you're going to set up a prevention programme, you need to know where to target the measures to prevent these bacteria causing mastitis in the cows.
So once you've identified the cause from the sample and you've fed that information back to the farmer, what should he do then?
The farmer then and his veterinary practice need to set up a health plan to control mastitis on the farm, and they look at the particular areas that need addressing. So they're not wasting effort, for example, investing money and time in tackling contagious mastitis, when really their problem is an environmental mastitis, bacteria that come from the environment.
Back in Ayrshire, the Barnet Hill cows are being milked in a new 12-point parlour. So has that had any effect on the incidence of mastitis in the herd?
Mastitis levels have dropped dramatically from, if we're doing a health plan as we're doing now, you'd actually see the amount of cows we're getting, but just now it's quite rare to get a cow with mastitis. And the reasons is it's just a new parlour, new vacuum system, and a simple parlour, very simple, very basic parlour. It's there to milk cows, and that's what it does.
Alan, not every dairy farmer will be thinking about putting in a new parlour to reduce his mastitis levels, so what advice could you give to them?
It's all really, I mean, as well as having your parlour running smoothly and having a level vacuum, that's very important when you're milking cows. It's all just about keeping the cows clean when they're in the cubicles, especially in the winter.
And by using a special brushing system, the cows at Barnet Hill make their own contribution to cleanliness and a reduced risk of mastitis.
You actually notice when the cows are saying the calving pen, they've come from a different system into calving pen, and then they don't go for the cake the first time, they actually head for the brush, and they spend a lot of time in the brush, and they can give it Waldy.
Robert's brush is a brush running along their back and a brush down their sides, but it keeps the flank, I mean the side brush especially will keep the flanks of the cows much cleaner. If the flanks are cleaner, the udder will be cleaner, there's less chance of infection.
And what about lameness? Has the new setup at Barnet Hill reduced problems with cows' feet?
It's not too bad, just because of the new system we went in, the cows are all walking in slats, there's no scrapers, no slurry getting pushed about. So they tell me the slurry scraping system is really bad for digital dermatitis, so it's no problem we've got. The only scraper we've got is a hand scraper, so that's the only thing we work with. The cows, they're going out through a foot bath every fortnight, a mixture of formalin and copper sulphate, and that seems to be working very well.
The thing about lameness in dairy cows is if the cow's just calved, it's become lame, it's trying to produce huge amounts of milk, it loses weight and doesn't eat properly, that reduces milk yield. The weight loss will cause them not to become become fertile again. You don't get them back in calve. It's not just the lameness that's costing you the money in these dairy farms, it's the fact these cows aren't getting back in calve. They may take 4, 5, 6 months to get back in calve. You've lost 3 months of production. And that's the major cost of lameness rather than the actual lame cow that you're standing looking at.